so many questions, and I won't ask any because I get to go to dinner with her. But I want you all to be able to ask questions. So thank you, Janelle, for joining Angela up here, and I'm gonna introduce you briefly before I turn it over to you, okay? So Janelle Miner is a first-year MA student of Southern Studies at UM and an Oxford native whose work sits at the intersection of storytelling, journalism, public policy, and African American studies. Her undergraduate research investigated the impact of NIL legislation on HBCU student athletes and their mental health outcomes. Her graduate work has documented the stories of Mississippi Valley State University's football team via a short documentary. This semester, she is working with Anne-Marie Anderson to conduct a location-based oral history project documenting the milestones after Meredith here at the university. Through her writing, photography, and videography, Janelle aims to create spaces where stories feel human, conversations feel honest, and people feel seen. She seems appropriate to be in conversation with Angela Tucker. Please help me welcome them both.
Okay. Is that coming through the speakers? Mm-hmm. Okay, I just couldn't tell. Okay, so it's so great to be here with you. To see you every week, but it's so great to be here. So the first question that I want to ask, do you see the story of Barbara Jordan as a Southern story or a story that just happened to take place in the South?
Oh, interesting. Well, Texas, sometimes thinks they're the South, doesn't think they're the South. So I think it's a quintessentially Southern story, though. And, a little bit about sort of how the film came to be is tied to the South, which is I'd been working on a trilogy of films about Black women and political power in the South. And so this was the final film in that trilogy. And I had made this film, All Skin Folk Ain't Kinfolk, which you've seen, yes, which is about a runoff election between two Black women for mayor of New Orleans. And in that film, there's a bunch of archival footage, and my archivist gave me a clip of Barbara Jordan speaking in the Watergate speech. And I didn't know who she was, and was like she looked familiar, but I was like, who is she? And was blown away by that speech, and then it kind of went from there. So I have always, when I think about this film, thought about it through the lens of her being a Southern woman, mm-hmm. Because I'm always thinking about how this work speaks to the other works as well. But her story feels just very unique to the South.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I'm glad that you brought up the archival footage. Mm-hmm. I do think that it's so interesting that you had so much archival footage in there. Mm-hmm. So when going through, how do you decide, especially with someone that has such a public-facing career, how do you decide which archival videos and photos to include?
Yeah, so this is a very complicated process because, I would say, almost half the film is archival. So going back to seeing that Watergate speech, I then thought, okay, somebody needs to make a film about Barbara Jordan. I'm sure it already exists. Turned out it did not exist. So that was the end of 2019. Then 2020 comes and we're all in our homes, and I spend a lot of time just watching archival of Barbara Jordan that's available online, like on YouTube, on C-SPAN, like anything that I can sort of get online. And I basically just make a folder and I pull it off YouTube in the ways we all do that. And I just start collecting things that she said, right? And then I hired someone to help me do kind of a first batch of research. And I said, when you don't really know that much about a person, first you're like, well, research things on Barbara Jordan. And they say, you got to get a little more specific than that. And then we sort of tied it to, these key moments, visibility moments, and kind of skewing away from networks. So then we found some things, and that's when I first found the Bork footage. That's towards the end of the film, where she kind of has that back and forth with the Republican and talking about the Supreme Court, and that was kind of a moment that I knew I wanted to play long in the film. Like, it's just like you find this archival footage and you're like, I don't care what it costs, it has to be in the movie. And that was really the point when I kind of started to feel like there was a movie there. And then you hire a team at that point because there's just too much. So I have 2 archival producers who are incredible. This woman, Suzanne Mason, and this other woman, Michelle Go. And Suzanne is based in Texas. So with a movie like this, you have to have a Texas archivist because you need someone who can physically go to the archives. So Suzanne is based in Austin. And then, I did a lot of research myself. And then I have like a co-producer and an associate producer who all researched. So it was just like a lot of research and a lot of people, and it took a long time, and it is the single most expensive part of the budget.
Okay, so we talked about this a little bit before the event started, but we talked about the Berlin Film Festival, and they're kind of wrapping that up. And a lot of artists there refuse to talk about politics and really try to make a division between politics and art, but you use your art to be very explicitly political. So how do you see your work and just the work that you do fitting into the current cultural landscape?
Yeah, I think that when you're a Black woman, everything that you do is inherently political. I could make a commercial about like Cheez-Its and somebody would find something political about it. So I just, I've accepted that, and I kind of leaned into it, honestly. I did grow up in a very politically active family. My mom worked for Jesse Jackson. And so it was just part of my DNA. But I think this thing that happened at the Berlin Film Festival is really interesting because fiction filmmakers, fiction or like actors, they all kind of think that they don't have to be political. Let's stay away from politics, etc. And that's a little bit of a luxury I think they have, but I think when you're making documentaries, and especially social issue documentaries in a way, it's like, I already know I'm in a niche genre, so I don't have to pretend my movies are anything they're not. It's a niche genre. If you found it and you want to see it, you kind of know what you're in for. So I actually find it to be a luxury. I can be like as political as I want to be because like, the movie's called The Inquisitor and it's Barbara Jordan. It's not a bait and switch, So, but I think right now it's really hard to not be political. And I really respected when I saw the actors and the directors and folks who were saying it's not political versus the ones who are saying it is. I have a lot of respect for people having the courage to say things are political right now.
Okay, we'll take a few questions from the audience. Do we have any questions? Sydney?
Hi, I just want to say I really, really enjoyed your work. And I wanted to ask a little bit about the parts of the film where you used like paper arts and animation and the way that you did the coloring on the film, like the archival footage, the kind of pinks and oranges.
Yeah.
What were like the aesthetic choices that went into that, and why were you playing with like that medium as well to represent things that maybe we didn't get from archival footage?
Yeah, great question. So when you're making a film about someone who is not alive, you have to come up with creative ways to highlight these moments that I can't ask her about these moments, but I know they're important moments. We decided we didn't want to do recreation, so have like actors act those moments. That just didn't feel in line with Barbara. I'm also a collage artist, and I'm friends with Kelly Gallagher, who did the stop motion animation. So we, had a conversation about how we can incorporate animation into it, and we knew we wanted to use archival photos and to animate the archival photos, like anything we could do to have Barbara's presence be felt in the film. So I just mocked up some different kind of collages for Kelly to get a sense of the look and the style, and then I am really like picky about color and font and all of that. So I was very like particular about a color palette. So we kind of picked this kind of jewel tones color palette, and then we picked these different moments that, that I wanted people to spend a little time with and come up with sort of animation for. So for example, Barbara and Nancy, I can't interview Barbara about Nancy. I can't interview Nancy because Nancy's passed away. The only thing I have is Barbara's autobiography. What's interesting about that is, a lot of people say Barbara was in the closet, but if you read her autobiography, you don't write a chapter about a person and how you first met them and talk about them throughout the autobiography and have that be your good friend. Like, it's pretty obvious. But so I knew I had the great story and these moments where she talks about Nancy. And so we wanted to really give that life and have it feel like a love story. So it was great that we had these great images that we could do that with. I also partnered with Mind Mom, who's a graphics company, and they did all of the kind of like the multicolored transitions, and that's all around kind of like giving you a history lesson in a way, but also I believe that history is not just what was happening politically, but it's also kind of pop culture, what was happening on TV, all of those things, as much talk about what's happening with race and gender as well. So we kind of use them as these just kind of stylistic transitions. And I wanted the film to feel kind of more fast-paced. I really wanted to reach a younger audience, and I was always trying to think about how to do that. So the animation was like one choice, music was a choice, just general pacing, and then the way the film ends, it's all tied to having the film speak to younger people as well. Long answer, but.
No, thank you.
Do we have another question?
I have a question. This is a wonderful film, so thank you for it. I actually have a question about the title, and it seems that based on how the documentary works, it seems to make sense. But I do wonder when the Inquisitor resonated with you, because it just as well could have been the Patriot or maybe other things, right?
Yeah. I just love the word, the Inquisitor, first of all, but Inquisitor is such a good word. The obvious answer is she says it in the Watergate speech, but I like that the notion of being an Inquisitor is a way to kind of take action and to really hold people accountable. And I mean, the joke I sort of had around the film was I wanted the title to feel a little kind of badass, I feel like she's a badass, and I didn't want to have something like Barbara Jordan quote, "She spoke to a nation." I just wanted it to be like a badass title, and I felt like The Inquisitor was a badass title, honestly, and because she was that way. So, but the ending where we're all, that's in addition to being when all of us are talking about this, English. When all of us are saying that we are inquisitors for our rights, that is the debate team, and then that's our crew. And for this film, I was able to shoot almost the entire film with the same Texas-based crew, and myself and my husband, Dwayne Prefume, who shot all the interviews. We were able to travel with the same crew, and it was a very diverse crew, and it was really special. So I wanted them to be in the film as well, and to ask the audience to be inquisitors. So when we're saying today I'm an inquisitor, I'm asking you to be an inquisitor as well.
Do we have any other questions? Go ahead.
I have a question about the music, actually. So I kind of was trying to keep note of some of the music choices. One of which stood out to me was I Stand Accused. Mm-hmm. So the intent behind the music selection, but also her parties. So even her relationship to music, I felt like that was very significant, and I just want to know more about the intent from the crew in your research. So all the research that you all did on her relationship to music and maybe the Black church from that start of the film.
Yeah, thank you. It's a few things. So first, she loved to sing, and she would have these parties, and she would play music at these parties and sing. And so one fun fact is once I heard this, I had this fantasy that I could find archival footage of these parties, and everyone was like, no, "That's great, no," because she was very private. So anytime I did an interview, at the end I would say, "You wouldn't have any footage of these parties, would you?" And everyone would be like, "No." And then Deanne, who was her assistant, who's in the film, was the person who said, "Well, I have these like weird DVDs, but I don't know what's on them, but I'll just give them to you." So we ripped the DVDs, and it turns out they were all video of her at these parties, singing at these parties. And it was incredible. It was such a gift. Everyone said her favorite song to sing was St. James Infirmary. And so my dream was to find it, and we found it. And to pay the publishing rights for St. James Infirmary is so ridiculously expensive. But anyway, but it was such a important moment at the end. But also we wanted something that wasn't a traditional documentary score. I wanted something that had music with lyrics in it. A lot of films don't have music with lyrics in it. So I had a composer, this Omar Fidel. I also, we licensed this kind of drone music from this guy, Martin Perno, who's an antiballist, who gave us kind of the transitions for the time periods, like the year, the kind of that stuff. And then we also had a music supervisor who also named Martin. We had like 3 Martins on this film. It was so weird. And all in music. And Martin did all the music licensing. And I just kind of would say to him, okay, this is the kind of vibe I'm looking for different time periods. And he would give me a bunch of things that felt like it was in line. And the I Stand Accused, there was a different song that had a similar vibe to it, which kind of harkened to kind of the activism. And so yeah, it was just really wanting to have music that made you feel like you were in the time period, like when you heard it right away. And then we were able to fair use a couple of things. So when Jimi Hendrix is playing the Star Spangled Banner, we were able to fair use that because that was like a moment that we were making a political statement about America, which is like, thank God. So it was a lot. It was a lot of effort, and especially with our music supervisor, we really, it was a lot of people that are friends of mine who do things a lot more expensive than this movie, who just kind of did favors. Like my friend is a music supervisor for Marvel and was like, I don't really need to get paid by you. So I was really fortunate with like people who just fall in love with Barbara and want to help tell her story however they can.
Okay, I think we have time for like 3 or 4 more questions. Do we have any more?
It can be 1 or 2 too. I mean, yeah. Or if you have one.
Okay, I'll ask one more. Where is it? Okay, I thought it was really interesting. We touched on this a little bit, but her sexuality is featured throughout the film. And so although it seemed like she was like somewhat private about that, do you think that, or do you see any ways in which that did shape her more public-facing career?
I mean, yeah, she was able to sort of set it up so that everyone kind of thought Nancy was her assistant, or they knew they had to go through Nancy. So that allowed for the 2 of them to just be able to travel together and be together, but everyone kind of knew. But I think, this is one of the things that's more controversial about her because, it says in the film, she didn't want to be tied to any identity group. She's like, I'm not a Black politician, I'm not a female politician, I'm a politician and I'm good at it. And so she was not really interested in being known for these different groups. And there are people who had a lot of issues with that. In her archives, there are letters from people kind of wanting Barbara to align herself even more so in the different communities that she was a part of. And she felt like if she did that, then she would lose the power that she had in that different kinds of people felt comfortable with her. And if she aligned herself too strongly, then with the various communities that she was a part of, then she wouldn't be able to make the change that she was able to make. She wouldn't be able to get like these Republicans to, kind of compromise on a lot of different things. So, I think that she led her life in a very truthful way, but she also was really good at compartmentalizing her life. And that compartmentalization is very typical to, people in underrepresented communities, like, knowing how to code switch, all these things. So it's an interesting thing to make a movie about someone who compartmentalizes their life, because it is a little more of a challenge, because it's like, there are all the people in Austin who, a lot of them are like the queer community that she was a part of in Austin. And then there's her students, and all those people feel a lot of ownership and see her life see her life a particular way. And then there is her Houston family, which is like her sister, her, the Black church, the people from the Fifth Ward, all kind of like Black people who didn't want to talk about her sexuality, were kind of uncomfortable that the movie was going to. And so you have to get all of these people to want to talk to you. And part of it is, we had an executive producer who was from Houston, Black man who teaches at Texas Southern, and he's amazing. And he really got us the access and the trust from the Houston population. Because you can make a movie and just talk to all the Austin people, but then you're not really getting a full picture. Mm-hmm. So it takes time to, to understand that that's important. And I'm glad we took the time to do that. The last interview we got, for example, was with her sister, which was an audio interview. And her sister has said no for years. And then finally, I think the breadth of the kinds of people that we got to interview made her trust us, made her think, okay, if all of these different people are gonna be interviewed, then I'll do it. So, yeah.
Interesting. Do we have any more audience questions? Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're good.
I'm curious about the power part. This I guess is like a comment that to be thinking. And because you just said ownership, so like the different areas of her life, different groups in her life, and how they stake claim onto her in different ways. And I wonder how that kind of goes, or it's kind of, it brushes up against the power that she desired to have in many ways, paired with her disability. And so like the literal kind of, okay, I'm losing some type of power in the sense of my actual abilities to move, right? But I'm just wondering about the power and the shifts in that, mostly because at the beginning of the film we saw the comparisons to Mammy, Maid, she was homeless, she was dark black, she's all these things, and then you see a shift in this sort of reverence for her, and then of course at her funeral we have all the great work. So I'm wondering how you all thought about that shift or read about that shift too in your research, or seeing the difference across time and letters to Barbara Jordan and how people regarded her. So in spite of labels, whether she was black, queer, this or that, what she identified herself as and how people, I guess, were selective in what they laid claim on and why they kind of recognized any of her power.
Yeah, we thought about power a lot. I think when I think about what, there's a lot of things that resonated for me in terms of wanting to make a movie about Barbara beyond just who she was and just in kind of like a personal way of her knowing, her being in a lot of predominantly white situations and sort of knowing how to navigate that, and being someone who's in a lot of predominantly white situations. And that's partially why that the Boston University section when she's in law school, where she talks about like, white people like to have a cup of coffee. It's like, it's a joke, I like to crack jokes, so I'm gonna have jokes in the movie. But but it's very significant, right? In terms of like, she had never really been around white people before. Law school was really the first time. She understood like from Harvard and tying in the debate team, that was kind of like the beginnings of her understanding the power of whiteness, right? And then she goes to law school and she can really study it and understand that if she's going to get to where she wants to get, she has to navigate having these relationships with white people, but also like maintaining her sense of self. And she really, something that is not in the film, but is very interesting is, Howard Thurman, the philosopher, is pastor, who was also a big influence to Martin Luther King Jr., she was very close to as well when she was in law school, and really learned a lot about thinking about philosophy. And so I think that moment in law school and understanding that she wanted to kind of get the respect for the people that she needed to get the respect from in order to do what she wanted to do was key. She campaigned for Kennedy, and there are many who say that the campaigning that she did, because she was able to get like labor organizers and sort of all of these different Black people who had felt disenfranchised to vote for Kennedy in Texas. There are many people that say that she really single-handedly helped get Kennedy Texas when he ran for president. That's how she got to know LBJ. And LBJ and her relationship, which, we talk about in the film, she also has an understanding of how important that relationship was for her getting the things that she needed to get. And their friendship was a real friendship, but it was also like in addition to like Ben Barnes, who's also in the film, it's just these various white male politicians who they needed to be able to kind of talk to Black people, because it's the time of like the Voting Rights Act and all of these kind of race things that they're navigating. So they could ask her for things and she could ask them for things. And I feel like just as time went on with her being a politician, she understood more and more the importance of these relationships and of power. And that's why we have the bite in the film where she says, it's not like I want power for myself. I want power to be able to do the things that I want to do for my constituents. So, I mean, yeah, it's a theme that kind of comes full circle. And I also thought a lot about gender and how I guess race and gender in terms of having a Black woman say that I want power and that it's okay is very radical. I mean, and, Barbara is not seen as radical in terms of the way we were defining it in like the 70s, but I considered her radical in different ways. And I know that people who see her can't really believe they didn't know who she was, and that feels pretty radical in its way. So yeah, there was a lot of thought that went into this power question. Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left, and I'll just wrap up and ask one question. Well, do we have any from the audience before I ask the final question? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'll go ahead and wrap up and ask. I'm sure as a creative, this is a very frustrating question to get, but do you have any plans of what might be next for you?
Oh God, I hate this question. I always say sleep, and I mean it, guys. I am exhausted. So a vacation, we're going to Ireland this summer, really excited. Yeah, I mean, I am in the early stages of thinking about a documentary about Black Americans leaving the US. And I have like some friends who have moved from New Orleans to Accra. And I've been really interested in this notion of how it's happening more and more. It's kind of an experimental documentary. I went to Ghana when I was in college for a semester, and this kind of like rite of passage of what leaving this country. It's thematically tied to this in terms of it's this question of who owns this country and like what does patriotism mean, and can you remain patriotic in a country that is like not really feeling about you. Early days with that, but I've accepted in my head that it's something I want to make. So that's the first step.
Okay, we're out of time. Do you have anything else?
I would say that The Inquisitor is going to be on PBS tonight at, I think, 10 o'clock on PBS. But it's available on YouTube, on the Independent Lens, so you can check it out there and tell your friends. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.